Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. At home, it is at Gamble Pavilion. For people who don't know the layout of UConn, they play home games in downtown Hartford, but they also play in an on-campus arena called Gamble Pavilion. It is one of the toughest road environments for a big game in college basketball. I've seen a million games there. But let's talk about UConn for half a second, because this was a question I got a ton on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday of last week. And we talked about it on the Tuesday night show live from Vegas. I was at the Kansas Duke game. But let's dive into UConn a little bit, because obviously when you're the defending national champs, when you've lost one out of conference game the last 2 years, when you lost 3 games total last year, and you lose 3 games in 3 days in Maui, yeah, there's going to be conversation. There was conversation about Dan Hurley. There was conversation about not going back to Maui. But I think the big consensus everybody wants to know is, what is wrong with UConn? Well, good news. You're probably in luck, because not only, everybody knows I'm a UConn guy, but I was with my parents last week. My mom and my stepdad are both UConn alums as well. So guess what? We watched a lot of UConn basketball. We probably talked about it way too much around the Thanksgiving dinner table. So with UConn, listen, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's not pretty right now. I also don't totally think it's quite as bad as a lot of people think. Listen, you go 0-3 coming off of a 37-3 season. It's going to create a lot of headlines. But one, but you got to remember, UConn lost so much talent off last year's team. Donovan Clingan, I think, is going to be the best player off of the NBA draft last year. Steph Castle might end up competing with him. Those were 2 of the starters. By the way, Cam Spencer scored 51 points in a G League game on Monday night, 12 3-pointers made. So that shows you how deep that team was. Tristan Newton was the point guard. He's playing for the Indiana Pacers. So 4 kids drafted, 3 in the NBA, 1 dropping 50 in the G League. So you lose that talent. But I think, to me, the issues with UConn are twofold. One, you were not really able to replace Tristan Newton as your starting point guard. And I think if you're not a UConn fan, if you don't watch him every day, I don't think you realize the impact that that kid had. You know that Tristan Newton, think about this. All the great guards that have come through UConn, Kemba Walker, Shabazz Napier, Ray Allen, whoever. Tristan Newton set the school record with most triple-doubles. In other words, you could argue, I don't know if I'm ready to make the argument, but you could absolutely argue best point guard in UConn history. Kemba had the best year, but Tristan Newton was unbelievable. And watching that game and watching that event in Maui, you could clearly see they don't have a guy to replace him, okay? This was a kid that was 6'5", 6'6", could get to the rim, 38, 39% three-point shooter, 2nd-round pick, as I said. And UConn, I think, is really struggling right now at the point guard position. You could see, by the way, that first game against Memphis just has crazy athletic guards, got in UConn. So they couldn't even run offense. Like when I look at the 3 games in Maui, Memphis was just like, I know it went to overtime, but that was a game that wasn't like, UConn did not play well for the first 32, 33 minutes of the game. And so I only bring it up to say this, is that the guard play is definitely an issue. Listen, a couple things. One, Hassan Diarra is great. He's part of the he was part of the show last year. We had him on a million times. I love Hassan. But to go from 6th man to an NBA player, it's just a big ask. And then the other thing, Aiden Mahaney, no disrespect intended, but I never understood when people in the preseason were talking about, and really in the summertime, remember when he committed? I remember doing my portal rankings. I had him like in the late 20s, early 30s of impacts transfers, and UConn fans were mad at me. I'm like, listen, these other media members that are selling you that he's the answer at point guard, he ain't it. He's an off-the-ball player. I've always envisioned him as like a 7th guy 7th player. So your 7th man, 2nd or 3rd guy off the bench, shoot some threes, whatever. He was never going to be a point guard. So I think that's issue number 1 for UConn. They don't have a point guard. And you know where that hurts? It hurts in many places. Is one, getting to the rim. They just have nobody that can get to the foul line and create fouls. That was a huge issue, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But also, it's just harder to run your offense. The offense just did not run as smoothly because you don't have that point guard that can take over games. Now, the second issue, your big guy's got to stay out of foul trouble, okay? And I know we're going to talk about the foul discrepancy in a minute, but UConn's big guys, first 2 games, They play two centers, Samson Johnson, a returnee, and Terrace Reed, a backup who transferred in from Michigan. Terrace Reed was maybe the best player on the floor against Memphis. The problem was both of them were in foul trouble. Each fouled out against Memphis, each fouled out against Colorado. Dayton, there was issues as well. And it led to what ended up being the biggest issue for UConn. And this is an insane stat. They were minus 50 in free throw attempts in Maui. How about this? I'll just read the stats really quick because I wanted to look them up before we came on air today. In Maui, they shot 11 free throws as opposed to 30 for Dayton in the last game. So that's a minus 19 free throw discrepancy. They shot 13 against Colorado. Colorado shot 28. That's minus 15. They shot 24 against Memphis. Memphis shot 40. That's minus 16. So the other team got 50 more free throw attempts. By the way, that's why Dan Hurley was mad. By the way, it's okay for Dan Hurley to yell at refs. They're adults. They'll be okay. Stop whining about Dan Hurley. A year ago, all the media that's criticizing him now called him a genius. So I bring it up because, listen, you're back home. You have to get right. And I think the good news for UConn as we start to actually preview this game, I think this is actually a pretty good matchup for UConn. This is a game where when you look at UConn and you look at Baylor and you look at Baylor's strengths and you look at Baylor's weaknesses, I think it actually matches up pretty favorably for the Huskies. UConn in this game, Baylor does not. Baylor's best athletic player, VJ Edgecombe, which some people are saying is going to be a top 10 pick. He's banged up. He got an ankle injury against St. John's, played through it the second game, but wasn't 100%, sat out their last game. I think that if he's not 100%, that's advantage UConn. And Baylor down low doesn't really have a ton of size. Now, they have Norchad Omier, the transfer from Miami, who's averaging like 11 boards per game. But he's like 6'7", 6'8" on a good day. And listen, I'm just saying this. If UConn can't keep that kid off the boards, and if they can't not get in foul, if they get in foul trouble in this game, the big guys, there's no hope for the rest of the year. There's no hope for the rest of the year. You have to keep your big guys out of foul trouble. They have to be able to defend without fouling. And if you can't do it against a 6'7" low post player, there's no answers. So I bring it up to say, as I look at this game, I actually do think it's advantage UConn. I think the 3 losses in 3 days were humbling. And I look back to the Maui thing. Listen, the Memphis game, UConn fans, you can yell at me. You can disagree. Memphis was the better team for the first probably 75% of the game. It probably should have been a loss. You almost stole it in overtime, whatever. The Colorado game, listen, that was the second round game. You lose by 1. That was a game. Liam McNeely was the best player. He gets hurt, goes to the locker room, comes back. And during that stretch is when Colorado made the run. Also, Alex Karaban, veteran leader, goes 1 for 7 from 3. If Alex Karaban goes 2 for 7 from 3, you win that game. The Dayton game was whatever. So I don't think UConn's as bad as everybody thinks. Listen, they're not going to, maybe they do, it'd be incredible, but they're not going 37-3 this year. Listen, I still think they're an NCAA tournament team. I think they're probably closer to a 5 or a 6 seed. I think they're going to compete for a Big East title, but I don't think they're going to run away with it. The good news is that 1, the Big East just doesn't appear to be very good, but 2, some of the teams that you're going to play outside of Marquette, like I don't know that there are the matchup issues that you saw in Mount. Bottom line, I think UConn beats Baylor. I'll say final score 82-76. I think UConn gets back on track on Wednesday.